So we had something that was kind of interesting that I found, and I wanted to bring it up because I think it's a topic that people don't talk about a lot, but it's why
True.
alcoholics choose self-sabotage. And I know there's a lot of people that are listening to this that are, that say, yep, that's me. That's me. I
Right.
self-sabotage myself. I get into a situation where I'm recovered, I'm doing the deal, everything is working great. And then all of a sudden, I start to do things that will self-sabotage my success.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of our loved ones and people around us don't understand that. Perhaps they don't see that part of a person who has an addiction problem. They don't see that part, or they do see it, but they don't understand why. So I love the way that it's written out in this article that you found, Damon, because I think that it will help a lot of people, either if you're in addiction, if you're in early recovery, if you've been for a little while, to watch out for these things, but also the people and loved ones around us.
Yeah, I think, what's interesting about it is I think that people understand that they've self-sabotaged themselves, people in
Mhm.
recovery, but oftentimes they don't know what actually triggered that, right? And I know that's in my case, I've self-sabotaged myself, unknowingly.
Right.
And then
Right.
later realized it was like, you know what? One of the benefits of being in recovery is sometimes you look back on the replay and you say,
Sure.
what could I have done differently? What was the catalyst to make that happen? Could I have done anything differently? Was I just wrong place and wrong time? And sometimes that's the case, Kristina. Sometimes it's just the wrong place, the wrong time. We view it as self-sabotage, but it's not really self-sabotage. It's
Right.
just bad luck, right? And that
Right.
happens. But oftentimes it is self-sabotage. And I found this article, and I'm going to bring it up on the screen here for everybody who's watching on the live stream. And we've put a link in it, guys, in the podcast so everybody can do it. It's from a recovery house called New Start Recovery. And it's really great. It says 5 reasons alcoholics choose self-sabotage. The number one reason was poor self-worth. What do you think of
Right.
that one, Christina?
I think this is absolutely the number one reason, and I think that might surprise some people because sometimes we have these boisterous, big, huge personalities, infomaniac kind of looking things, or narcissistic, and people think, "No, it isn't that. They just don't care. They don't care that they're hurting us, or they don't care what they're doing." Or it may be some kind of front that you're putting on that is not at all true. I have not yet met somebody who's new to recovery or even in recovery for a certain length of time that doesn't have to grapple with self-worth. I mean, it is absolutely confusing to people from the outside, but inside, it's how we feel. When I first got sober, I had no self-worth. And when I really looked at it, after, taking away the alcohol, I realized what I really had to work on, which was self-worth.
Well, let me tell you one of the things about the self-worth that kind of rang true with this is that, especially when you get into recovery, what happens is you want to make up for lost time, right? But
True.
sometimes your perception of yourself, what you can do, what you can't do, a lot of the times you'll swim, the water will go way over your head, you're in way too deep, and you really can't come out and say, you don't feel that you can come out and say, it's like, wow, I'm a little over my head here.
True.
Right. And so this inner dialogue of the perception of who you are will get you into trouble. So you'll say things, you'll do things, you'll take on commitments that maybe aren't totally appropriate for where you're at in your recovery.
So true, Damon. I love that you said that part and you brought that out because I think that the regret that some of us have from our past actions make it seem like, I can't really complain. I can't really say that I'm good at something because I've ruined this part of my life. Or I can't really say that I know, what my mind is saying because I've not shown that to people when I've been under the influence. And there's just so much shame attached to it. And I hope that Recovered Life puts a dent in that because that is one of the things that people need to understand.
Yeah. And, I love that you talked about shame there because, we found through doing these shows and talking with experts, and we're going to be talking to more experts about this because,
Yes.
this whole idea of shame, 12 step programs, when they first started, they only talked about fear. And
Hmm.
primarily because, it was primarily written by men. post-war, World War II,
Mhm.
during World War II, through that, they're not going to talk about shame. They talked about fear. They talked
Right.
about what happens when fear comes up. But if you look at it, really what they're talking about in some of this instances is shame. It's not fear,
Absolutely.
it's shame.
Sure.
And shame, we know, is the lowest vibration.
It is, and, if you go into deeper 12-step programs like ACOA, they do actually talk about it, but the original text from 80 plus years ago doesn't use that word as much as I've seen it since then, and I don't think our society used that word, I really don't.
Yeah, and we
So
talk about, the whole thing about, and this goes into number 2, I think the shame element of it, right, goes into number 2, which is reason number 2, which the New Start Recovery article points out is a need is imposter syndrome, which we talked about last week. Actually, we had a guest on last week talking about imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, the statistics for imposter syndrome are 70%, and I honestly believe that that's low. And that's for everyone, whether you're in recovery or not in recovery. I believe that the other 30% are just, maybe not willing to share that they have these thoughts, or at least the next 20%, because I believe that everybody gets an attack of imposter syndrome. It's a word that came out about 30 years ago, but it has certainly entered the zeitgeist since then. And people are talking about it, and they're letting go of a little bit of the shame because they're realizing many of us have imposter syndrome. I've never met a group of people more gripped by imposter syndrome than addicts, though. Addicts definitely have it, in spades.
Yeah, it's interesting because the imposter syndrome, which we dug into last week, it really it's interesting. I think that there's so many people that are capable in recovery. Matter of fact,
Hmm.
my feeling is, and when I'm coaching people or talking with people or working with people that are recovered alcoholics, especially new in recovery, I'm like going, you have a huge edge in the business world. You have a huge, you hear me
Yes,
say that a lot because we're able to handle pain. We're also able to process complex emotional feelings. A lot of times we
absolutely.
have this capacity and tool to be able to do it. But it's so many people will get themselves in great situations. And I see this in relationships and work, and they will really do well. But their inner dialogue is like, it's not doing well, but yet they're the favorite employee. They're the
Right.
person that's always getting stuff done, right? But then they'll blow it up. They'll blow it up. And right in the middle of it.
Well, and what does imposter syndrome mean to you, Damon? Just curious, because I'm not
Well,
sure
I
that we
think
always talk
it's
about the definition.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think imposter syndrome is feeling that you're a fake or you're not. Who am I to really be able to do this, right?
Right.
I know it means different things to different people and it's applied differently, but I think in this article, it's more of like not feeling that you really belong there.
Yeah, the general sense that you're a fraud is, I think, the term that I hear most, and that does that explains so much when you think about an alcoholic. So, think about somebody who's done really, really well, and they have, entered in and started using alcoholically maladaptively. They're using alcohol in a way, or addiction or drugs in a way, because they feel like they are a fraud. A lot of us might not see that from the outside. We always talk about in the program, don't compare your insides to somebody's outsides, but the whole world is comparing their insides to somebody's outsides. And I
Right.
think just sensitive people that are really talented truly suffer from imposter syndrome at a deeper level.
Well, it's funny that you say that because with the comparing, I think social media has killed us with this too, Christina,
A little bit.
because I even find myself, I even found myself this weekend saying, looking at somebody's social media and saying, "My like they must be way more successful than me. They must like what don't I know about the life that they're living right now? They're
Right.
probably posting pictures that were from 5 years ago, right? Like I don't know, but I don't know what's going on with them, and I start to laugh because I laugh at myself because I have enough
Mhm.
recovery that I know it's like, oh my god, that is the stupidest. Like, why am I saying that to myself? That is so ridiculous. But it's kind of like it's we compare and contrast so much, and I think also this feeds into this need for alcoholics to have outside things fix us, And
Yes.
anytime we say that, like, if only I had that, it'd fix me. If only I had the job. But then you get in there and then you feel that you have imposter syndrome. That's not going to work out well for you.
No, it isn't. It isn't. And what I've learned about comparison is that it's automatic. But the information that comes from that comparison, you can make a decision to either A, say, wow, somebody's already done it. So that's great because now I have, a schema, I have an example of somebody's already done it. Or you can choose to make it a negative thing. But, this whole idea of don't compare yourself, that's kind of impossible as they peel back feelings and they peel back layers of our emotions. Comparison is usually something that happens to us, not is us. And so we are going to compare. However, what we do with that information after is the most important part of it.
Yes, yes. And I think it is the what we do after is the most important part of all of this, right? Like, so
Right,
it's like the
right.
actions we take once we realize that we're having these feelings, or realizing that we're taking these actions. Number three, I love this because I see
Huge.
this a ton, is need for control. Alcoholics self-sabotage because they have a need for control. They don't feel that they're in control, and things start to spin out of control.
And Damon, I think this could almost seem like a paradox. Again, I've said this a few times to the point that people think, well, then if you need control, why do you ingest something that makes you out of control? Have you heard that question before?
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? That is a very, very, very good question. There's a lot of things in recovery that I think if somebody who uh, does not suffer
Hmm.
from addiction does not understand. Like,
Right,
look, let's be honest. If I had a broken down car, I always give this analogy all the time. Okay, Christina, if my car broke down and I didn't know how to fix it, I wouldn't go to somebody else who has a track record of not knowing how to fix it
right.
to help me with my car. And look, that isn't that most alcohol recovery, is that we
Yes.
go to people who are had a worse time than we did for the most part for help. There's a lot of these paradoxes in there, but it works. For some
It
reason it
works.
works. We know that
It
that pure base thing works well.
We do, and I actually have heard people ask me that question. I've actually been asked that question, "Well, don't you guys just sit around and talk about how you used to drink? Isn't that dangerous for you to hang around alcoholics?" But it so isn't, because being around people and being in a peer support to peer group allows me to see that I'm not alone and that other people did these kinds of behaviors. Other people, like my need for control was so big that I had to check out every single time because it would hurt. And we did a show on this last week about trauma being the base of a need for control. Well, alcoholics have this in spades. I mean, they have it all the way. We have it all the way through us, right? That we want to control people, places, and things and outside stuff, and we can't. And, we're not in the place of acceptance. So that builds and builds and builds. I can still remember feeling that tension inside and then feeling like the only thing that was going to allow me to check out was to physically check out with alcohol. But the problems that come after are, really, really the troublesome part of alcohol. And I never could exactly focus on that. It was always, let me just get to that point where I can take a deep breath.
Yeah, none of this makes sense to people who I get that, and I'm very honest about it because, like, I would, I've told people, especially family members of people that we work with, they're like, I don't understand that. I'm like, because it's really not logical. But
Right.
is it logical to really drink yourself to death when there's no really need to do that?
No.
No, it's not logical, right? Like, that logic plays no role in this.
Right.
It's warped, and I totally understand that. Reason number four, I like this: seeking comfort and familiarity.
Right.
And this was kind of interesting. What was your thoughts on this one?
I totally saw my drinking habits as my life. So I can really agree with this point and, thinking that there was no option except to have to get blotted every night, that this is what I did. This was a part of me. And without it, I would have nothing. And, that familiarity of, being at a bar or having people come over really, really seemed to comfort my nervous system. Even if things are really, really tough, one of the biggest fears we have, and it's confusing, is the fear of being happy because we're not sure when that other shoe is going to drop. And so my fear was that if I let go of this, the only thing that's giving me any kind of peace, there won't be anything else behind it. And it's just comfortable. A lot of drinking is habitual, it's ritualistic. And I know I bring drinking up a lot, but the same applies to drug use, to codependency, to eating, to spending money, all of the things that we do outside of ourselves to seek validation and comfort and peace. And, I really, really didn't see and didn't know, which we've talked about before, that there was this life. That's why the peer-to-peer support thing really stepped up my game, because I realized, oh my gosh, there are people out there that do not have to drink 7 cocktails to go to sleep. They can do
Yeah,
it.
well, I think there's no coincidence that control and this whole thing of really being the familiar
Mhm.
are together, because the thing is that there's an energy level to active addiction. And I hear people say it's like, it was horrible, but it was my horrible. Like,
Right,
at least it was safe. I knew, like, it was bad, but I knew that bad, right? I could
right.
operate within that bad. And this is the thing that is what is also baffling about people who don't suffer from addiction, because I know that we have a lot of people who are ACOA that are coming into ACOA, and they're coming into ACOA, or they're coming into codependency, this idea that there's some sort of dysfunction, right,
Mhm.
in their relationships, and they have a loved one that's starting to get sober. So they start listening to the show, they go to the network, they go to Recovered Life, they start to try to get some answers for this, and they don't understand that. They don't understand, why would somebody stay in a position that's so bad for them when all the empirical data is around that it's just not working. Well, it is somewhat working. There's a sense of control in the
Mhm.
crappiness.
Mhm. I know at least I'm gonna get to that place. And you can apply this to ACOA for people who have a story and, to forgive or to move forward, to explore seems much scarier than just bad habits. There are character defects in every one of the programs, and I'm not a fan of that word, but I'll use it because it's universally used. That we can stay attached to our old lives. We can do that as ACOAers, and yet still be confused why an alcoholic stays attached to their alcohol. So it is applicable in all of the
Yeah.
programs.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Number 5, this was a good one, was harboring resentments.
Yes.
And just, if you just popped onto the live stream here, you're listening, we're listening to the New Start Recovery blog. We're talking really about why alcoholics choose to self-sabotage. And we're at number 5, harboring resentments. What do you think of
Oof.
that one, Christina?
Makes me want to take a deep breath. I hate to admit it, even now, 25 years later, but boy, did I have resentments when I first came into the program, or when I first decided to address my alcoholic drinking. I had so many resentments. And, in some cases, I had true grief that I kind of hid as resentments, right? True grief that was like actually not really just a resentment. It was absolutely something I needed to walk through. And so I believe, that this is kind of the part where there's freedom on the other side of allowing your resentments to come up unexpressed, unexamined anger is could become a resentment. And so it's the work part of the program. And I do agree with it.
Well, this is where the self-sabotaging comes in. I think this is where we see the emotions rise, and we see people blowing things up.
Right.
And I think, you see this a lot in the work and family situation where, like, maybe it's a holiday or you're in a work environment, you're working on a team, and everybody has no idea. Then all of a
Hmm.
sudden, boom, this person blows it up, right?
Right.
Because what's happening behind the scenes I always went to this really great 12-step meeting in Burbank, Kristina.
Yes.
And this meeting had been around for like 50 years. And they always said the topic of the meeting every week was what's really going on. So it was like, what's okay, well, I'm having a problem at work, but what's really going on? Oh, well, I'm having a problem with control. Right.
Right.
So I think if you take, look, you take untreated alcoholism, and without any kind of peer support group or any kind of therapy or anything like that, coaching, and you have poor self-worth, imposter syndrome, a need for control, you're not comfortable, and there's no familiarity there, and then you start to harbor resentments, that is going to end up in not a great place.
That's true. That's true. That's
Place.
That's true. That's true. That's why we state that the work starts once you put the drink down. It's great when people get sober, but in order to stay, you have to do the work. And this is the work, recognizing where we are holding on to control, recognizing where we need to do some emotional cleanup, some excavation is part of the work. And it will allow you to stay. And that's what we always want to end up with, is staying. Don't leave before the miracle happens.
Absolutely. And I think, let's be real too. I think most of that 3 months to a year or 2 years, especially in coaching, when you have
Mm,
people that you're coaching, it really is about keeping people from self-sabotage. I mean,
truly.
I have to tell you, I know this with guys, especially guys, late 20s, early 30s, but it's really anyone. But really that age group in particular, wow. I mean, they can rebuild themselves so quickly because of the youth, right? Because the
Hmm.
youth and energy, they can go from local detox or being locked up to a really great business, a really great family, really great people, and then blow it up seemingly over something that's really inconsequential to the bigger
True.
picture. But that's really why I thought this was good to talk about, because if you see yourself self-sabotaging, Kristina, what do you tell the people? I mean, what do you tell the people that you're working with that are
Sure.
just blowing stuff up? They're
Sure.
I think it's better they start to, I think, sponsors, specifically good sponsors in 12-step programs, or coaches or therapists, they start to see planting the seeds to blow it up.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things is that I will tell somebody, I notice you want to burn the village down right now. You want to burn your
Yeah.
bridge. You're angry. You're scared. And so I always remind them, this will not last. But what you really want is not to burn the bridge down, which allows you to isolate. What you want is to, say what you need to say and have it be met with kindness and appropriate responses. And so rather than stepping toward, and lighting that match or pouring gasoline on it, why don't we sit back for a day? If you still feel this way tomorrow, then we can go and address it and figure out how to walk through it in a way
Yeah.
that is both honoring to you and the other person. But
Well, yeah.
often it won't last. It will not last.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to be really honest with you. I still to this day will have a thing. It's just like, it's not working, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes sometimes you're just around difficult people. Like,
True.
let's be real. I mean, like, people, the mental health of people just in general, forget about addiction and recovery, just the regular people walking around that don't suffer from any addiction. There's a lot of crappy people in the world sometimes that you will come across. Right. And I suffer from, it's like, I will feel the feelings of, what? I'm just going to burn this to the ground
Yes.
rather than participate anymore. And there'll be just scorched earth, right? And I'm not going to say that I don't have those feelings anymore. I called you the other day about something. I was so pissed off about something, but
Right.
after I laughed about it later, after I talked with you about it. But here's the thing that I think that's so interesting. Here's where you know that you're on the path to recovery, Kristina, is feeling those feelings, totally acknowledging that I have them. I'm not ignoring that I have them, but
Right.
understanding that I don't do that there's
Hmm.
no need to do that, and that I'll feel differently about it later. And even if I don't feel differently about it later, I will not further my case. I will not help my recovery. I will not help humankind by burning everything to the ground.
So
And
true.
that's just yet another amends I'll have to make, right? That's just
Right.
another thing that I'm going to have to do. I'm moving further away. So it's like, I think if people are listening to this and they're feeling like, I'm just going to burn it to the ground, I think that is like, I'm going to self-sabotage this.
Hmm.
Just because you feel it doesn't mean you actually have to do it. And this was a huge learning experience thing with me in recovery.
It's so true. You do not have to do that. You do not have to go down the road of self-destruction or destruction of relationships because you're having an angry moment or you're feeling really, really scared. Let's find the emotion underneath. Let's find where the trigger point is, and let's go back and heal what that triggering is trying to tell you is still in existence. Those are clues to I haven't cleaned up some of the things that I need to clean up. And as an adult, we get that opportunity. We do not have to wait for somebody else to do it. We can do it ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. We can do it ourselves. And this is why great peer support, this is why being involved in a 12-step group, having a coach, having a therapist, having somebody that you could work with, that you could express this to. It's like, hey, I'm feeling like I want to burn this to the ground. Like I'm feeling like this is just not working for me. And I'm going to make, not only am I not going to play the game anymore, I'm going to overturn the board and make sure
Right,
no one can play the game. That you're not on the right path when that
right.
happens, but just being able to talk to somebody about that diffuses that. And we have solutions for this now.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.